Good to be with you all. Missed last week, and I'm glad to be back. We've got quite a few questions from people, so we'll get going. The first viewer says recently, oh, here we are, can't read. That's what happens when you miss a week, you forget how to read. I've recently had some events that have pointed out that I have more work to do in the area of applying real love to my relationship with the outside world. To clarify, I get how it works and how the dynamic looks with close relationships, family, friends, kids, and how eventually someday we'll be living in more harmony as I apply the principles more consistently. Where I become overwhelmed is the thought of applying the principles of real love out in society and in the workplace. How does it look when you're full and have to be in a world where pretty much everybody else is still drowning and for the most part believing that lies are the only way to live? So their decisions and judgments from that place affect you in very real ways. So when you're trying to be unconditionally loving, I'm kind of summarizing your question, how do you function in a world where getting and protecting behaviors are the norm? Where people lie to you, attack you, manipulate you, and so on. And this is important. Just because people invite you to fight with them on the field of death doesn't mean that you have to accept. So even though the world is really an unloving place and people are lying and attacking and doing all this stuff, you don't have to join in. And on the other end, you don't have to convert them to the only true way. So I'm not advocating that we jump in with the getting and protecting behaviors of the world, nor am I advocating that when people do these things, we should stop them and say, now, you know, this is wrong and will harm you, because people aren't ready for that. So what can we do? Keep it really simple. We simply set an example for people by telling the truth. And almost invariably, what we tell the truth about is ourselves. And I actually suggest that in the beginning, we first tell the truth about ourselves to ourselves and not even to other people. So we get in a practice and a rhythm of being truthful about our own flaws, mistakes, and so on, at least to ourselves, so we get to where, we can get good at it. We can also practice telling the truth about other people, but again, to ourselves. When we're first learning the principles of real love, you're going to discover that people don't especially enjoy it if you interrupt them and say, you realize you're lying, or you're acting like a victim, or you're attacking. People are rarely grateful that you would point out to them the behaviors that have been, cherished to them for their entire lives. But you can at least point it out to yourself. You could say, well, this person's just being empty, this person is attacking me, this person is acting like a victim. And then decide, why did they do that? So you can do it kind of like the 5 W's that we talk about. Or is it why? See, what is it? What, why, what. That's what it is. So first we do the what. What are other people doing? What am I doing? How do I respond to other people's attacking? So somebody attacks you and you become afraid and withdrawn and quiet. All right? So you identify their attacking. This is all to yourself. You identify the fact that you become afraid and withdrawn. Now, why? Why do people behave as they do, and why do you react as you do? Pretty simple. Not enough love. And then the next W is, what could you do differently? Well, to start with, accept them. Rather than fight with somebody who's attacking or condemn somebody who's lying, just quietly accept them for who they are. Be an example of unconditional loving yourself. You can't lose. You're certainly happier if you do that. And then there are some ways that you could respond specifically to specific getting and protecting behavior. So let's take somebody lies, for example. The most important thing to remember when somebody lies is, so what? You're not the arbiter of justice on the planet. It's not your job to correct them. So you note that they lie, you note why, note how you respond to it, and just accept them as they are. Now, what if the lie matters and you're in a position to point it out. You're a parent. You're the boss. Then you might sit down with that person and give them an example of unconditional love. So unconditional love is all about loving and teaching. So you sit somebody down who you know has been lying and whose lies are affecting other people, and it's your business. It's not just it bothers you. That doesn't make it your business that it bothers you, by the way. So you sit with this person and you say, here's what I heard you say. I heard you say A, B, C. Well, it turns out that the truth in that situation is D, E, and F. And you knew that. So I know that what you're saying isn't entirely true, and I entirely understand why you would lie. People lie because they're afraid of being criticized, they're afraid of not being accepted, they're afraid of being ridiculed. So I understand why you would lie, but I need you to know that I know you did, and it has an overall harmful effect. People don't trust you. It's not possible to correct mistakes when we lie about them. Lots of reasons why we lie, and then lots of reasons that it's detrimental. And you explain all of that to the person who's lying. If you simply do that, you don't need to tell people, don't lie. We think we just have to do that. We have to say, I'm offended that you lie, or don't lie anymore. Like we think people are just completely stupid. No, you just tell them you understand it and that it's detrimental. And it would be far more productive in the workplace to tell the truth, even about their mistakes. And that if they're willing to tell the truth about their mistakes, you will find it much easier to correct them, or to help this person correct them, and everybody at work or wherever it is that you're talking about will function much better together. So we could go into lots of the examples of responding to getting and protecting behaviors, but you can read that in the books, Real Love, Real Love in Marriage, the Victim Book, and so on. Mainly to understand that we don't have to correct everybody, just note what they're doing and make conscious decisions not to engage in those same behaviors ourselves. Here's a viewer who says, I bumped into your website while I was searching for some keywords on Google, and it was with great pleasure that I looked at the top 10 videos. Glad you're here on the website. I trust that you will deal with my problem confidentially. That's worth a word. When people write, I change their names, change their occupations almost always, change their geography, so that if somebody says, I'm an accountant in Annapolis, Maryland, that might seem too specific to some people. They would be frightened by that, failing to realize that there are probably, 102 accountants in Annapolis, Maryland. So usually I change the occupation, name, and geography, so that instead of being an accountant in Maryland, you would be a, tax attorney in North Dakota. Now, if somebody already knows your problem, knows it to the letter, and they hear me describe it, it's possible that they could identify you in that. But if they know the problem that intimately, I'm not going to be sharing anything that they don't know anyway, am I? So we work fairly diligently to preserve people's anonymity. My problem is the following. You say, I'm Lithuanian, my husband is German, and we live in France with our children. Living for me in this country is a very frustrating experience because I'm not the particular alien immigration category that Germans are happy to accept. We moved here because the man who was then my boyfriend found a good job for himself. I have 2 master's degrees, and I'm fully certified in English as a second language teacher. And after great difficulty to find work, I was finally employed by a language school as an auxiliary teacher. I'm not familiar with that phrase. I'm sure it's a European phrase. My guess would be that it's like either a teacher's assistant or a substitute teacher. I'm not really sure. I did not care about the status much, in other words, the inferior status of being an auxiliary teacher versus being a full teacher, because I took great pleasure in teaching my students, and I'm a very popular teacher. I requested more teaching hours, and last week my boss, when I asked my boss for more hours, he called me certified but incompetent. That would be insulting and difficult to hear. And he asked me to go for an official meeting. I'm very unhappy about this. For me, it's hard to find a job. I'm neither a native speaker of French nor of English, and so I feel utterly rejected. I do not have very high expectations of work, but I cannot see myself being at home all the time. Now, notice we do this kind of all the time, and we don't mean to, but you say things like, I don't have expectations of work, but clearly you do, because you said you're very unhappy that your boss said something that might affect how you might function at work. So you do have expectations of work. It's okay, but we can't make any progress until we can see what we do. I was recently working with a woman who has just made some phenomenally selfish decisions that have affected her, her husband, her children, her extended family. In all the decisions that she's made, she has thought about just one person, her, what she wanted, her freedom, her feelings, her sexual pleasure, her everything. And in the process has complained about everybody else's failure to be understanding of her as she has turned her back on morality, responsibility, good sense, whatever. And you know, and I said to her, well, people have a difficult time because your choices have been selfish. Oh, well, she exploded. That was that little poof that you saw on the moon the other night. She just went crazy because I would dare to say that she was selfish. And of course, this is why people act like victims. They have learned that as soon as somebody criticizes them, if they explode, then nobody will ever dare to criticize them again. But how can we help somebody unless we can help them see the truth about where they are? Until she can see her behavior as selfish, why would she ever entertain the notion of changing it? Why would she ever entertain the notion of, instead of pointing at everybody else's selfishness, which of course she defines as not giving her what she wants, why would she stop doing that and instead look at the choices she's making? She wouldn't. So these are harsh words to hear sometimes as people describe our behavior, but until we see it, we're dead. So you do have expectations around work. It matters to you how you're seen there. It matters how many hours you get. It matters to you how your boss sees you. You have a lot of expectations. You said, you continue, you say, I'm a really popular teacher, but I'm just unlucky with my boss. My husband is very satisfied with his job, which is very specialized, and he would rather divorce me than quit his job. So essentially you're saying we're stuck in this place, and we're probably not going to be able to move because my husband likes his job. But here I'm given this terrible evaluation at work. You continue, how does somebody deal with rejection from their surroundings? How does one deal with their nationality when it's viewed as negative? How does one lead a life where she is not an accepted member at her work? Being an auxiliary teacher is uncomfortable because they can discontinue my contract any day, and not accepted in the place she lives. And how does one spend a lifetime being an outsider trying to prove that they are just as okay as the next door neighbor? I just don't know how to go on living here in Germany under these present conditions. I want to be able to find my peace of mind regardless of the circumstances. So first, I admit, I don't know you very well, but I am familiar with a great many people in circumstances like yours. So I can share that experience with you and possibly make some observations that you wouldn't be able to make on your own. It's usually hardest to see ourselves. Pretty easy to see others because we have less investment. You said that your students love you, but you were just unlucky with your boss. But then in quite a few different ways, not just one or two, several here, you communicated that you're really unhappy. You're unhappy with him. You're unhappy with the country that doesn't welcome you. You're unhappy with being an auxiliary teacher. You used the words rejected, unhappy, outsider, pain. You just went on and on. So it's pretty obvious that you, in a huge way, feel victimized by a lot. Your supervisor, the country, other people. I mean, it's pretty comprehensive, sweetie. In fact, the only people you don't feel victimized by are your students, but you see, you're in a position of authority over them. So pretty much anybody that you can't control, as you can with your students, you feel like that they've victimized you. And I can promise you that the people around you feel your unhappiness and your victimhood. They do. You just really went on, and you said, these people see me as an outsider, they don't understand me, they don't love me, they don't accept me, whoa. There have been many ethnic groups in this country who have immigrated here, been brought here as slaves, whatever. And it's been interesting to observe the behavior of these ethnic groups. Some settle in even though their original circumstances in being brought here were ugly. They were brought here as indentured servants, as slaves, in conditions of extreme poverty, and they just worked hard and got an education and improved their lot. Some other groups have come here and complained and screamed and yelled that nobody did enough for them and that they weren't included, and that everybody hates them and I'm going to eat some worms. And because of all of that victimhood, which they spew as just a constant stream at everybody around them, they completely isolate themselves from everybody. I mean, it's pretty easy to illustrate. Imagine we have two people who are just, they're not going to be different nationalities, not anything. Two kids in your class. And they come into the class from another town. So, not even a different county. And they come into class, and one of them is just grateful to be there and welcomes people and talks to them and tries to befriend people and does her work. Then another young lady comes into the class and she complains that nobody likes her. She complains that nobody tries to make her feel at home. She complains the teacher's not nice to her. She complains that her fellow students are mean and not accepting. Which of those two kids do you think the other kids are going to want to be around? And we're going to assume that they're identical in every other way. Identical in height, similar in appearance, educational background, wealth, all of that. But one of them whines, complains, and is hateful, and the other one is accepting and works hard and self-responsible, meaning she takes responsibility for her own feelings. People hate to be around people who complain. They hate to be around victims, which of course then is self-fulfilling for the victim. The victim comes into a situation and says, I just hate it here. You're all not nice to me and you're mean. And then people avoid her because they realize what she's told them with her words is, I'm going to hate you no matter what you do. Well, let me think. I could be around people where what I do is appreciated, or I could be around people who say, I hate you no matter what you do. 99.9 people out of 100 are going to, I don't know how you get 9/10 of a person, so maybe 999 out of 1,000 would want to be around the person who is not complaining and attacking. I know you don't mean to do this, darling. I'm not picking on you, but your letter here is it just oozes negativity, venom even. And then you wonder why you're unlucky with your supervisor. I'm going to suggest to you that it's probably more than just luck. Now, am I saying that things like ethnic discrimination, racial bigotry, and so on, that they don't exist? No, not at all. But the more negative we are, the more we isolate ourselves from everybody. I can remember being in high school, and two boys entered the class at the same time. And one was, they were both of the same ethnic group. And one just involved himself in everything. He was nice to people, he worked hard, he was accepted as though he had been born there, even though he was born in another country. The other boy came and whined and complained and said nobody was his friend, and everybody avoided him. So he fulfilled his own prophecy. And I'm going to suggest that that's very likely that you're doing this here. Consider the two alternatives. You can change, or the entire country of Germany, all of the people in your school, the teachers, and your boss could change. Probably not a snowball's chance that the latter is going to happen. So you look to yourself. you might try completely embracing these people, treating them as though they do not see you differently, because, on the whole, we impart to people motivations that they don't have. We think everybody's looking at us when they're not. In fact, social psychology has studied this and called it the spotlight effect. They've actually done studies where people have gone into a room with, say, mismatched socks or a shirt turned inside out or whatever, and the person who was the participant was certain that everybody was looking at them and how glaringly obvious, their miscue was. And it turned out that, on the whole, nobody noticed. Everybody's too occupied with themselves. So you embrace these people. You're not a native speaker, so learn the language well. I have good friends who have come to this country to apply themselves diligently, and they cannot be distinguished from native speakers. Whereas some other people come, they spend all of their time with their particular ethnic group. Nothing wrong with that, except that then they sound like people from that ethnic group for the rest of their lives. They don't ever try to mimic the pronunciation of the people in the country in which they live. So do that, the language, learn their cultures, invite them to do things with you, do things for them, rejoice in being around them. And you'll discover that people really respond to being loved. And they respond much more to love than they care about ethnic differences. So, again, I'm not dismissing that there might be people who treat you differently, but we can largely negate that by the choices that we make. Here's a viewer who says, I'm very empty. I overeat, and right now I don't have anything in the house to binge on. Well, I didn't get this email for several days, so you might be dead. I'm just teasing you. I should have hurried. I could drive to the store, but I weigh over 300 pounds, and I feel ashamed and horrible about myself. But the thought of that overeating right now is overwhelming. I feel overwhelmed by this attraction and draw to the food right now. I'm at the computer, but I really just want to run away from this life and find something sweet and hide in my car and eat. I run from the fact that I make poor decisions as a mother, as a partner, as a human being. I run from the fact that I don't feel loved. I feel scared and alone and really stupid. This is not something you can do by yourself. We try to do weight loss as a program or as somehow a function separated from the rest of life. There's so much shame and pain for you in this. Share it. Not for sympathy, but so that you can feel completely seen. You call people up and you say, I could have eaten the plate of well-prepared food that I made, but instead I ate that and then a carton of ice cream and a bag of cookies. Feel what it's like for people who love you to laugh even at you and with you. There is a gloriously healing effect that comes from having people who care about you laugh about your behavior, as opposed to mocking you as a human being. So, like when a good friend of mine calls and says, let me tell you how I treated my daughter yesterday. And rather than minimize it, I say, wow, you should be put up in front of the parenting police and killed. When he can hear his behavior phrased in the most stark, harsh way and be loved, he's going to go back and interact with his daughter feeling more accepted and loved, and now less likely to be inconsiderate to his daughter. For example, I work with lots of guys who are porn addicts, and they feel such shame around it. And when they tell people, cluck their tongues, especially if they live in a... Did I just actually say especially? I hope not. I hope it was a brain misfire. Especially people in religious communities who tend to look down on and condemn people who participate in these immoral acts. And yet, having now known several hundred, I'm sure by now, porn addicts, they'll tell you that the more ashamed they feel, the more isolated, empty, and alone they feel, the more likely they are to use their drug, because that's all porn is. And so when people shame them, these people actually think they're doing some good. These people are actually so, what's a better, stupid, that they believe these people don't know that porn addiction is harmful for them. And so they, this is wrong. God thinks it's wrong, or I think it's wrong, or whoever it is that thinks it's wrong. They already know that. With that additional shaming and additional emptiness, turns out that when we tell people not to do a thing, accompanied by disapproval, we actually make it more likely that they'll do it. And you've experienced the same thing here. Look, you said, I'm empty and afraid and miserable, and what do I want to do? I want to run down to the grocery store and get something that I can binge on. I want to eat a cow. Well, yeah, sure. So what's the solution? It's not a quick and easy solution. I'm not going to prescribe some low carb or whatever diet. What I'm going to suggest to you is you talk to people and allow them to love you. And as you genuinely fill up, you will eventually find the place that's optimum for you. Even when you're eating, when you feel utterly unconditionally loved, you're eating less, you're not binging, you may discover that you weigh, let's see, right now you say you weigh 300 pounds. You may discover that you weigh 220 pounds, that you're 40 or 50 pounds overweight. But for you, that's optimum. Nobody can tell you what the right weight is for you. Everybody's different. Turns out that fat metabolism is way more complicated than anybody thought. Hormones in the brain and the body and in the individual cells and in the lining of the stomach, and it just kind of goes on and on. So I'm not going to get into that and how to modify all that and how to modify your diet. You figure that out. But the mechanics of the diet are meaningless if you don't feel sufficiently unconditionally loved, which requires that you talk to other people. Because no matter what diet you go on, if you don't feel loved, you'll be right back to eating. So relax, honey. Tell the truth to some people who can laugh with you, laugh at you, call you fatty, I'm not kidding, and love you. What a healing experience that can be. So give it a shot. Let me know. I'm not recommending you go around and call people fatty, by the way, to everybody who's listening, but it can be quite a healing experience for somebody who's been afraid of that word. This viewer says, how do I get real love with a partner who doesn't want to speak when I'm in the same room with him? Won't speak to me. How do I handle silence imposed by my partner? This really isn't all that complicated. If you're not married, because you didn't really specify, you tell your partner what you require in a relationship. Now, pay attention. I'm not saying you tell your partner what you require from him. But what you say is, what I need from a partner in a loving, intimate, exclusive relationship are these qualities, one of which would be, surprise, talking to me. That's a real stringent requirement. And he doesn't have to do anything, but that's what you need. And if he then enthusiastically responds and says, wow, that's what I want too. I don't know why I hadn't already thought of that about that. Well then, hallelujah. But what are the odds of that? Pretty close to zero. Maybe 1 or 2% of people who are already sullen and sulking and don't talk to you when you tell them this is what I need. How many of those are going to respond by saying, yeah, me too? It's just very unlikely. And so if he enthusiastically joins you in the process, great. If he doesn't, you leave. And I mean, if he doesn't within days, do something, show some interest in speaking to you, get out. Why would you want to be in a relationship with somebody who doesn't speak to you? It just doesn't even make sense. It's not really even a relationship. It's just sort of like the relationship you'd have with your lamp. Now, if you're married, again, you still get to tell your partner what you need. That's okay. You're not demanding that your partner change, but you do describe what you will be doing, and you invite him to join with you. So you say, I've been learning some things about unconditional love, and one of the things I've learned is that we feel more loved and more loving when we tell the truth about ourselves to the people around us. So I'm going to be telling the truth about myself to some wise men and women. I'll be describing who I am as an individual. I'll be describing who I am in my relationship with you, which means that sometimes I'll actually be describing your behavior briefly, just to provide context for my talking about my own behavior. So you describe what you're going to be doing. If he decides to participate in this truth-telling festival that you're engaged in, well, woohoo, hallelujah, huh? If he decides not to, then I suggest that not only do you tell the truth about yourself to these wise men and women, that would be your first step. You do not want your first step in telling the truth about yourself to be to do that with an emotionally paralyzed mute. That's not going to go well. So first practice with others, then you tell him, now I'm going to start practicing telling the truth about myself with you. And you do that consistently. There's no reason, if you want to be in a partnership with somebody, a marriage, that you should settle for somebody who's not even there emotionally. So notice, you're not requiring anything of him, but you tell him the truth about yourself. You describe to him what you've been reading. You say, you know, in the chapter in Real Love and Marriage, I learned this about myself. I learned that I could do this better and this better. And what you'll discover is that if you consistently share who you are, one of two results will tend to happen. He'll either tend to involve himself in the truth-telling, to where at least he listens and maybe occasionally grunts. Or he'll become so annoyed by your telling the truth and attempting to have a relationship with him that he'll leave. Either way, you win. So it all really begins with you establishing the example of being truthful. We tend to want to do it backwards and want people around us to change. How would they do that unless they saw us do it? Here's a viewer who says, I was talking to a real love friend who is drowning, and we wondered when she's ever going to stop doing the same things over and over again, like running. I said, well, when you're ready. But I love you if you never stop. That's very sweet of you, actually. Nice example of loving, or at least it looks like it so far. She started arguing with me that that the Real Love group and I should just tell her to stop running. I said, that's not what we're here for. I asked what she's running from, and she says she really doesn't know. So she was really angry. She said that we were all doing it wrong, and she was going to have her own little pity party. And I can love her, but I didn't know what to do with her attacking. So it's pretty obvious that this lady's lost. Like you said, she has no idea what she's doing. She's kind of blind to her own behavior, mostly, and doesn't know what to do about it. So she needs more than just passive loving. She needs to be loved and taught. So it might be somewhere between what you said and what she said. It's not really important. What matters is that if you really care about somebody, you wouldn't do what she said, which is to say, stop running. I mean, that's just kind of a stupid thing to say. If somebody's in the midst of acting like a victim, well, then they're drowning. And telling them, stop drowning, that doesn't make sense in anybody's planet, does it? You can't just say to somebody, don't be afraid. You can, however, gently and lovingly help them see their behavior. So you could say to your friend who is withdrawing, you could say, so can you see in the course of your conversation here how you have described withdrawing from one person after another person, and how when you become offended or afraid, you consistently pull away, which is entirely understandable. Gosh, what's more natural than withdrawing from pain? But it leaves you alone. So see, that's doing more than just passively listening. In fact, if somebody is in a behavior repeatedly, if we just listen and don't offer our observations, how could we really be loving them? which means caring about their happiness. If they're in a persistently unproductive behavior, they're miserable. And almost without fail, they don't see what they're doing. So we have to help them see it. And then, after helping them see it, we might sometimes say, not stop it, or here's what you should do, but at least say to them something like, because I've done this many times, so you can see your behavior, it's understandable that you do it, it's obvious that you keep doing it because that's the only choice you see. Is that right? And you'll discover that the answer will be yes 98% of the time. Then you might say, would you be interested in other ways to see your behavior, other ways to see other people's behavior, and possibly other ways to respond to other people? As long as you don't have expectations that people will listen to you or do what you say, now that's genuinely loving. Because it's like seeing somebody in the in the bottom of a deep hole. You wouldn't just walk by and listen when they scream, "Help me, help me." Listening isn't going to do any good, but you can say, would you like to know where you are? For example, if somebody's deep enough in a hole, they may not even realize they're in a hole. They may think they're in a cave. They may think there's a blindfold over their eyes. Whatever. You help them see where they are and then say, would you like some suggestions as to how to get out? Very much like that. So we can be pretty active in loving our friends and help them to avoid the behaviors that are quite literally killing them. I was going to go a little bit longer, but I think I'm not going to. I've been traveling for a couple of days, and I'm going to get my knee operated on tomorrow, so I'm going to stop a little bit earlier than I usually do. I appreciate you guys sending the questions. Please send me some more to greg@reallove.com, and we'll see you all next week. In between now and then, surprise, it's always about real love. See you next Tuesday.